a lot of folks got it wrong. So how did the pundits and the poll watchers get this election so wrong? One of them, you see right here, is Mr. Frank Luntz, and he tweeted out on election eve, he said, this is what he said. He said, when the dust settles from the 2022 midterms, the GOP will have between 233 and 240 House seats, outdoing their total from 1994. Republicans will also take control of the Senate. So let's bring in now the pollster and communication strategist, the man behind that tweet, and Mr. Frank Luntz. Good morning.
And I've acknowledged it on tweets since then, and I don't see any pollsters showing up. Where the hell are you?
Well, you are. So what happened? How did so many people, including you, get it so wrong? And as I said in the beginning there, we tend to over-index, and we've been doing it since 2016, over-indexing the MAGA part of the electorate.
There is a fear that they did not include enough Republicans in their samples because we knew from 2016, 2018, and even 2020 that Trump voters tended not to respond to pollsters because they thought that the results would be used against them. So there was an effort to, as you say, over-index this time. That's number one. Number two is that people came to the polls and they finally decided enough is enough. About 8-9% of the public changes, they come in undecided, and they have to decide what they're going to do at that moment. And they come in potentially wanting to vote one way, and they end up voting the other. The thing that the Republicans,
what do you mean by that?
Where they come in and they think I'm going to vote Republican, and then they go and they have to decide, do they actually pull the ballot, or do they want to make a statement by voting Democrat? 8% of the population comes in, and they may change their minds. And third is that the independents, and this is where the Republicans have to take very close analysis to, the independents usually break 55-45 Republican. If they break 60-40, Republicans win. In this case, they broke 50-50. That's a real problem for the GOP. It's a major drop. And one more.
Yeah.
Republicans actually got 5 million more votes for the House than the Democrats. 5 million. So why don't the results show themselves in the congressional races? The answer, redistricting. That it had a bigger impact against the GOP than anybody realized, and you could not know this until election day.
On a bigger, larger scale, what happened here in New York?
You brought up independence, right? And one of the splits I saw was 49-47. You said 50-50, but we get the gist. The Wall Street Journal editorial board this morning writes, the message couldn't be clearer. Independent voters in swing states may be unhappy with the direction of the country, but they didn't trust the GOP enough to give them power. They go on to say that party will have to adjust its policy on abortion and its message for 2024.
You can never ask people to adjust their policies based on elections. Sometimes principles are more important. And you have to be able to convince the American people that even if they disagree with you on that principle, you are worthy of their support. So I challenge their changing their position. That said, they have to accept that if they're going to be that strict on abortion, they're going to turn off younger voters, which voted overwhelmingly Democrat, and they're going to turn off women, which voted significantly Democratic. And that's the way it is. There are times when you don't follow the polls. There are times when you look at people straight in the eye and you say, enough. I hear you. I know where you stand. I'm simply against it. But then accept what happens to you on Election Day.
Since you mentioned young voters, Kate, let me make this point, please. Pardon me, just before, because I don't want it to get past. A presidential advisor said, I was telling the POTUS the entire time that the streets were not saying what the polls were saying and that young people were coming out.
That's a given. That's not so insightful. I don't want to be critical of that person. Yeah, the young people were voting, but the young people still vote on a much smaller percentage than their parents, and a really tiny percentage compared to their grandparents.
Yeah.
So to me, I want to look forward. I want to take where we stand right now and focus on what it means over the next few weeks and next few months. Everybody's rehashing the past, and that's why people had enough of Donald Trump. He wasn't rehashing last week. He was rehashing what happened 2 years ago. We need to look forward. That's what the American people are asking of all of us. Okay, it's done. We voted. We have a really, really split government right now. Now let's move forward and see if we can get something done.
I want to get to the Trump aspect of this because I know you just did a focus group this weekend with people about who they prefer. But on the polling, I think people do not trust polls right now. They did not trust them after 2016. But how do you fix it?
I don't. You don't.
So polling is irrelevant.
You
is what you're
guys
saying.
spend way too much time focused on who's going to win and lose and trying to predict that.
Isn't that what you
Said
do?
from
You're
the former
a
pollster.
I don't do that. I don't do that. I haven't worked in a political campaign in more than a decade. I used the numbers that were given to me by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. And no matter what they say
Frank,
now,
how can you say that? Your tweet just
But
said
here's-
before, I predict this person is this
yes,
group will win. and this
based
group will
on
win.
their polling,
Okay.
not my
So
polling.
then here's my question on that, which is, because this is correct. People are saying, well, the media said this, the pundit said this. Democrats also thought they were not going to fare very well on Tuesday night. Now they're obviously happy that they did, but they were bracing for losses. How did their pollsters fix this? Is there any point in polling essentially anymore if you can't get it right?
What a great lesson to the media.
Very good question.
Stop focusing on the who's up and who's down and start trying to understand why. Give us insight, give us information that we can use. People watch this show because they're more informed by giving you their 10 or 15 or 30 minutes. They watch because they really care about what's going on and they want to stay up to date on all the events that are important. They're not asking you to project the future. They want to fully and completely understand the present. So let's go back to using polling for what it was meant to do. Insight, information, knowledge, and if you're lucky, wisdom. But you
think
got
you
to
wanna
show
get
that
to the MAGA stuff?
You got to show that focus group because that's what's really important.
We do.